Jacob Reinhardt drummed his fingers against the polished mahogany of his desk, his gaze drifting toward the floor-to-ceiling windows of his corner office. From the 40th floor of the Dominion Tower, the city sprawled before him like his personal chessboard, a game he'd mastered over 15 years of corporate dominance. The morning light glinted off neighboring skyscrapers, their glass facades reflecting his own success back at him. His assistant, Melissa, had just delivered his double espresso, the third of the day, and closed the door with practiced quietness. Jacob preferred it this way. Silence helped him think, and thinking had made him rich. He glanced at his watch, an understated Patek Philippe that cost more than most people's cars, and frowned. The supplier from Tokyo should have called 20 minutes ago. Punctuality was non-negotiable in his world. When his phone finally buzzed, he almost missed it beneath a stack of quarterly reports. The screen displayed an unknown number with an unfamiliar area code. Jacob hesitated, then answered with the cool confidence that had become his trademark. Reinhardt speaking. For several seconds, there was nothing but soft static. Jacob was about to hang up when he heard it. A small, unsteady breath. "Hello?" he repeated, this time with an edge of impatience. "Hi, Daddy." The voice was tiny, fragile, belonging unmistakably to a young boy. "Can you come pick us up, please?" Jacob froze, his espresso cup suspended halfway to his lips. A cold sensation washed over him, starting at the base of his neck and spreading outward. "I think you have the wrong number," he said reflexively, his voice steady despite the sudden tightness in his chest. The boy didn't hang up. Instead, he sniffled quietly before speaking again. "But Mommy said if anything happened, I should call you. Your name is Jacob Reinhardt, right? Mommy told me your number is in her red notebook." Jacob's breath caught. His name, his private number, not his office line, not his public contact, but his personal cell phone that only a handful of people possessed. And that notebook. Only one person had ever kept a red notebook. Elena Morales. The name he hadn't allowed himself to think about in 8 years, 2 months, and 17 days. Not that he was counting. "Who is this?" Jacob asked, his voice dropping to a whisper as he swiveled his chair away from the door, suddenly paranoid about being overheard. "Who's your mother?" "Mommy's name is Elena," the boy said simply, confirming Jacob's suspicion. "She's not waking up. She's on the floor. I tried shaking her, but she won't open her eyes." Jacob stood abruptly, nearly knocking over his espresso. "Where are you right now? What's your name?" "I'm Michael," the boy said. "And my sister is Sophia. We're at our house. The blue one with the big tree. In Briar Hills." Briar Hills. The small town 2 hours outside the city where he and Elena had spent that summer, their last summer, before everything fell apart. Before he chose ambition over love and told her he wasn't ready for the commitment she wanted. "Michael," Jacob said, trying to keep his voice calm while his mind raced with implications he wasn't ready to face. "How old are you?" "I'm 7, Michael answered. "Sophia too. We're twins. 7 years. The math wasn't difficult. Jacob closed his eyes, gripping the edge of his desk until his knuckles whitened. "Michael, I need you to do something very important for me," Jacob said, already moving, grabbing his jacket from the back of his chair. "Is there a neighbor nearby? Someone you know?" "Mrs. Wilson lives next door. She gives us cookies sometimes." "Good. I want you to go to Mrs. Wilson's house. Take your sister with you. Tell Mrs. Wilson that your mom needs help. Can you do that for me?" "But Mommy said to call you if something bad happened," Michael insisted, his voice quavering. "She said you would come." Jacob paused at the door of his office, feeling the weight of those words. 8 years of silence, and Elena had still trusted him to be there if she needed him. The realization hit him with surprising force. "I'm coming," he said firmly. "I promise. But I need you to get Mrs. Wilson first. Put the phone in your pocket, but don't hang up. I'll stay on the line." He heard rustling, then the sound of a door opening. As Michael called for his sister, Jacob strode through the executive floor, ignoring the startled looks from his employees. He burst into his assistant's workspace. "Melissa, cancel everything. Today, tomorrow, all of it." Melissa blinked up at him, her professionalism momentarily shaken by the unprecedented request. "Mr. Reinhardt, you have the board meeting at 2 and dinner with the Chinese delegation. Handle it," Jacob snapped, then caught himself. "Please, it's an emergency." Without waiting for a response, he headed for the elevator, already calculating the fastest route to Briar Hills. Through the phone, he could hear children's voices, a door closing, then knocking. A woman answered, her tone shifting from warm greeting to concern as Michael explained in halting words why they were there. Jacob stepped into his private elevator, leaning against the wall as the gravity of the situation fully hit him. A woman he once loved was unconscious. And if what the boy said was true, he had 2 children he'd never known about. The elevator doors opened to the executive parking garage. Jacob made his way to his Tesla Model S, slid inside, and engaged the self-driving system to bring the car to the exit while he remained on the call. "Michael, are you with Mrs. Wilson now?" "Yes," the boy answered. "She's calling the ambulance for Mommy." "Good. That's good." Jacob took a deep breath as he took control of the car. "I'm on my way. I'll be there in," he glanced at the navigation system, "about an hour and a half. Can you stay with Mrs. Wilson until I get there?" "Are you really my daddy?" Michael asked suddenly, his voice painfully hopeful. Jacob's hands tightened around the steering wheel as he accelerated onto the highway. For 8 years, he'd built walls around the memory of Elena, channeling all his energy into becoming the corporate titan everyone expected him to be. Now those walls were crumbling under the simple question of a 7-year-old boy. "Yes," he answered, surprising himself with the certainty in his voice. "I think I am." As the city receded in his rearview mirror, Jacob felt something he hadn't experienced in years: pure, unfiltered fear. Not the calculated risks of business deals or market fluctuations, but the primal fear of facing a part of himself he'd deliberately left behind. He'd walked away from Elena because he wasn't ready to be the man she needed. Now, speeding toward Briar Hills with the taste of panic in his mouth, Jacob wondered if he was any more ready to be the father these children needed. The highway stretched before him, each mile bringing him closer to a reckoning he never saw coming. The countryside blurred past Jacob's window as he pushed well beyond the speed limit. His usual methodical approach to life had been replaced by a single-minded urgency that surprised even him. Each minute felt like an hour, each mile an eternity. He kept the call connected, though Michael had gone quiet, occasionally answering Jacob's check-ins with one-word responses. When the GPS announced his arrival in Briar Hills, Jacob slowed, memories flooding back with each familiar landmark. The town hadn't changed much. Still the same quaint main street with its aging storefronts. The same gazebo in the town square where he and Elena had danced one starlit night. It seemed impossible that life here had continued unchanged while his had transformed so completely. "Michael, is the ambulance there yet?" Jacob asked, turning onto a tree-lined street that tugged at his memory. "They took Mommy away," the boy replied, his voice small and tired. "Mrs. Wilson says we have to wait for you." Jacob's throat tightened. "Which hospital did they take her to?" "Briar Hills Memorial," came the voice of an older woman, presumably Mrs. Wilson. She must have taken the phone from Michael. "Are you really the children's father?" The question hit Jacob like a physical blow. Yes, I believe so. I'm Jacob Reinhardt. Elena and I were together before." He couldn't find the right words to explain the complexity of what he and Elena had shared. How do you summarize the love of your life in a casual conversation with a stranger? "Well, Mr. Reinhardt, these children need someone right now. Elena, she hasn't been doing well lately. I've been worried." Mrs. Wilson's voice carried the weight of unspoken concerns. "What happened?" Jacob asked, dreading the answer. "I'm not entirely sure. The paramedics mentioned something about pills. They found an empty prescription bottle." Her voice dropped to a whisper, presumably to shield the children from hearing. "They think it might have been deliberate." Jacob closed his eyes briefly, forcing himself to keep driving. Elena, vibrant, passionate Elena, had tried to end her life. The thought was incomprehensible. When they were together, she'd been the one full of hope and dreams, while he had been the pragmatist, the one who saw obstacles instead of possibilities. What had happened to change her so fundamentally? "I'm almost there," Jacob said. "Can you give me the address again?" 5 minutes later, he pulled up in front of a modest blue clapboard house, instantly recognizing the massive oak tree that dominated the front yard. In another lifetime, he and Elena had picnicked under that tree, planning futures that never materialized. Now he sat frozen in his car, staring at the peeling paint and worn porch steps, trying to process that Elena had raised their children here, without him. The front door opened, and Mrs. Wilson emerged, a gray-haired woman with kind eyes and a concerned expression. Behind her stood two children, holding hands and watching him with unmistakable curiosity. Something shifted in Jacob's chest, a recognition so visceral it nearly stopped his breath. The boy had his eyes, his jawline. The girl, softer features, but his coloring. Jacob stepped out of the car on unsteady legs. "Thank you for staying with them," he said to Mrs. Wilson, unable to take his eyes off the children. "Of course, they're wonderful kids." She gave his expensive suit and luxury car an appraising glance. "Will you be taking them to the hospital now?" Jacob nodded, still struggling to find his footing in this surreal situation. "Yes, right away." Mrs. Wilson squeezed the children's shoulders gently. "Michael, Sophia, your father is going to take you to see your mom now. Be good, okay?" "Father." The word echoed in Jacob's mind, foreign and terrifying. Michael stepped forward first, studying Jacob with an intensity that belied his 7 years. "You look like your pictures," he said simply. Pictures. Elena had shown them pictures of him. The knowledge was another blow. Sophia remained half-hidden behind her brother, regarding Jacob with wary eyes that reminded him painfully of Elena's. "Hi," Jacob said, crouching down to their level despite his $1,000 suit. I'm Jacob." "We know," Michael said. "Mommy told us about you." Jacob swallowed hard. "What did she tell you?" "That you live in a tall building in the city. That you're very important and busy. That you didn't know about us because you and Mommy lost touch." Michael recited this as if from memory, a story he'd been told many times. The carefully constructed explanation struck Jacob like a knife to the heart. Elena hadn't vilified him to their children. She'd protected him, even in his absence. "I would have come sooner if I'd known," Jacob said, the words feeling hopelessly inadequate. "It's okay," Michael said with a shrug that tried too hard to be casual. "Mommy said you would come if we really needed you. And you did." The simple faith in the boy's statement nearly undid Jacob completely. He cleared his throat, fighting for composure. "We should go see your mom now," he managed. "Do you have car seats?" "We're too big for car seats," Michael informed him with the dignity of a child who considered himself quite grown up. Mrs. Wilson intervened. "I have booster seats they use when I drive them to school sometimes. Let me get them for you." While Mrs. Wilson retrieved the seats, Jacob stood awkwardly with his children, trying to bridge 8 years of absence with halting small talk. He learned that Michael liked dinosaurs and baseball. Sophia, who had yet to speak directly to him, clutched a well-loved stuffed rabbit and watched him with Elena's thoughtful gaze. The drive to Briar Hills Memorial Hospital was quiet, the children subdued in the back seat of his Tesla. Jacob kept glancing at them in the rearview mirror, trying to reconcile their existence with his understanding of his own life. Had part of him always known? Had there been moments, in the dead of night, when he'd wondered if leaving Elena had cost him more than he'd calculated? At the hospital, the reality of the situation hit with clinical fluorescent clarity. Elena Morales was in critical condition after a suicide attempt. She had 2 minor children whose only apparent guardian was their previously uninvolved father. Paperwork needed to be filled out. Decisions needed to be made. The social worker who approached him had kind eyes, but a professional detachment that made Jacob's skin crawl. "Mr. Reinhardt, we need to discuss temporary arrangements for the children while their mother is." She glanced at Michael and Sophia, who were coloring quietly in a corner of the waiting room with materials a nurse had provided. "While she's receiving treatment. They'll stay with me," Jacob said immediately, surprising himself with the certainty in his voice. The social worker, Ms. Patel, according to her ID badge, regarded him skeptically. "I understand you haven't been involved in their lives previously?" "That's correct," Jacob admitted, the words bitter on his tongue. "I wasn't aware of their existence until today, but I am their father, and I'm fully capable of caring for them." "Being capable and being prepared are different things, Mr. Reinhardt," Ms. Patel said gently. "Do you have a suitable living environment for children? Experience with childcare? An understanding of their routines, needs, allergies, school arrangements?" Each question highlighted the vast chasm of his ignorance. Jacob, who prided himself on always being the most prepared person in any room, was completely out of his depth. "I'll figure it out," he said, his jaw set in the stubborn line that had intimidated countless business rivals. "They're my responsibility." Ms. Patel seemed unconvinced but nodded. "We'll need to verify your paternity officially, of course. In the meantime, I'll need to inspect your living situation before I can approve temporary placement. Jacob thought of his minimalist penthouse with its sharp edges and breakable art, the refrigerator that contained nothing but protein shakes and champagne. What do I need to do to make it suitable? Before Ms. Patel could answer, a doctor approached, her face grave. Are you family of Elena Morales? Yes, Jacob said, the old lie coming easily to his lips. They had never married, never even been engaged, but in all the ways that mattered, Elena had been family, his first real family since losing his parents as a teenager. She stabilized, but it was close. The overdose caused significant stress to her system. The doctor looked at him directly. Does Ms. Morales have a history of depression or suicide attempts? I don't know, Jacob admitted, the weight of his absence from Elena's life pressing down on him with crushing force. We've been estranged. The doctor nodded, unsurprised. She left something for you, she said, handing Jacob a worn leather bag. The paramedics found it clutched in her hand. Your name is on the envelope inside. Jacob took the bag, the familiar scent of Elena's perfume, something floral and faint, hitting him with unexpected force. Inside was a cream-colored envelope, his name written in her distinctive handwriting. With trembling fingers, he opened it and unfolded the single page inside. The words blurred before his eyes, but one line stood out with painful clarity. The twins are yours. I'm sorry I never told you. Jacob stared at the letter, reading and rereading Elena's words until they were seared into his memory. Jacob, if you're reading this, it means I finally failed at being strong. I've tried, for so long, to be everything they need. But some days the darkness is too heavy, and I'm so tired of carrying it alone. The twins are yours. I'm sorry I never told you. At first, I thought you'd resent being tied down when you were so determined to conquer the world. Then too much time passed, and I convinced myself you were better off without the burden of a family you never wanted. Maybe that was unfair. Maybe they deserved to know you, and you deserved to know them. But I was afraid you'd reject them, afraid you'd take them from me, afraid of disrupting the fragile happiness we'd built without you. Michael has your intensity, your focus, your determination. Sophia has your quiet depth, your creativity, your capacity for empathy that you always tried to hide. They're extraordinary, Jacob, the best parts of both of us. I've kept your number in my notebook all these years. In case something happened, in case they needed you, in case I couldn't be enough anymore. I don't expect forgiveness. I just ask that you take care of them. They're everything. Love always, Elena. He folded the letter carefully and tucked it into his inside jacket pocket, close to his heart. Around him, the hospital moved in a blur of activity. Nurses checking monitors, family members comforting patients, the sterile efficiency of a system designed to manage human fragility. Michael and Sophia still sat in the waiting area, their small heads bent over coloring books. They were oblivious to the seismic shift occurring in their world, the way their father's universe had just realigned itself around their existence. Can I see her? Jacob asked the doctor, his voice hoarse. She's not conscious, the doctor cautioned. We've had to sedate her heavily. The next 24 hours will be critical. I understand, but I need to. Jacob trailed off, uncertain how to explain his need to see Elena, to confirm with his own eyes that she was still breathing, still fighting. The doctor's expression softened slightly. 5 minutes. Just you, not the children. Jacob nodded gratefully. He crossed to where Michael and Sophia were coloring, crouching down beside them. I'm going to see your mom for a few minutes, he explained. Then we need to go to your house to pick up some things. You'll be staying with me for a little while, until your mom feels better. Sophia looked up at him, meeting his eyes directly for the first time. Is mommy going to die? She asked, her voice so soft he almost missed it. The question hit him like a physical blow. No, he said firmly, with more confidence than he felt. Your mom is very sick right now, but the doctors are helping her. She needs to rest and get strong again. Michael set down his crayon with deliberate care. She's been sad a lot, he said matter-of-factly. Sometimes she cries in her room when she thinks we're asleep. Jacob swallowed past the lump in his throat. I'm sorry she's been sad. But you two did exactly the right thing today, calling for help. You were very brave. Sophia's small hand reached out, touching his sleeve tentatively. You came, she said simply. Yes, Jacob agreed, feeling the weight of promise in those two words. I came, and I'm not going anywhere. He left them with a kind-looking volunteer who offered to stay while he visited Elena. Following a nurse through the maze of hospital corridors, Jacob tried to prepare himself for what he would see. But nothing could have readied him for the reality of Elena, pale and still against white hospital sheets, tubes and wires connecting her to machines that beeped steadily in the quiet room. She looked both exactly the same and completely different from the woman he remembered. Her dark hair, once wild and long, was cut into a practical bob. Her face, always expressive and animated in his memories, was slack in unconsciousness. But her lips were still full, her lashes still impossibly long against her cheeks. This was still Elena, the woman who had once known him better than anyone else in the world. Jacob approached the bed cautiously, as if afraid to disturb her even though he knew she couldn't hear him. He took her hand, cold, so cold, and squeezed it gently. "I'm here," he whispered. "I found them. I'm taking care of them. Just focus on getting better." He wanted to say more, to ask why she hadn't told him, to demand explanations for 8 years of silence, to confess how often he'd thought of her, especially late at night when his success felt hollow. But those conversations would have to wait. For now, it was enough to stand beside her, holding her hand and promising things he wasn't sure he could deliver. The nurse returned too soon, gently indicating that his time was up. Jacob reluctantly released Elena's hand and walked back to the waiting room, his mind already racing ahead to the logistics of what came next. The children needed clothes, familiar items, their school books. He needed to learn their routines, their preferences, their allergies if they had any. He needed to transform his life, overnight, into one that had room for 2 small humans who depended on him completely. The social worker, Ms. Patel, was waiting for him when he returned to the children. "Mr. Reinhardt, I've spoken with hospital administration," she said. "Given the circumstances, we're willing to grant you temporary custody while we process the formal paperwork, provided you can demonstrate appropriate accommodations." "Thank you," Jacob said, relief washing over him. The thought of the children being placed with strangers, even temporarily, had been unbearable. "We're going to their house now to collect their things. I'd appreciate your guidance on what they'll need." Ms. Patel nodded, her professional demeanor softening slightly. "I can follow you there and help. Children need consistency and security during times of trauma. Familiar objects, routines, comfort items. These will be essential in the coming days." The drive back to the blue house was quiet. Michael gave directions from the back seat, his small voice serious as he guided Jacob through the familiar streets of Briar Hills. Sophia remained silent, clutching her rabbit and watching the passing scenery with solemn eyes. Ms. Patel followed in her own car, parking behind them as Jacob pulled into the gravel driveway of Elena's home. The house looked different now, knowing what had happened inside its walls. The cheerful blue paint seemed a facade, hiding the struggle of a woman raising 2 children alone while battling demons he could only begin to understand. "This is home," Michael announced unnecessarily as they all got out. He glanced at Jacob uncertainly. "Do you remember it? Mommy said you used to know this house." Jacob nodded, memories washing over him. "A long time ago," he said quietly. "Before you were born." The key was where Elena had always kept it, hidden in a small ceramic frog beside the porch steps. Some things, it seemed, never changed. Inside, the house was a study in contrasts, evidence of both careful homemaking and gradual decline. The living room was tidy but worn, with mismatched furniture that had seen better days. Colorful children's artwork adorned the walls, bringing life to the faded wallpaper beneath. Books were stacked on every surface, speaking to Elena's enduring love of literature. But there were also signs of struggle, past due notices on the counter, a persistent drip from the kitchen sink, water stains on the ceiling that hinted at roof problems long ignored. Elena had been maintaining appearances while her world slowly crumbled around her. Ms. Patel took charge with gentle efficiency, guiding the children to pack overnight bags while explaining to Jacob what they would need. School uniforms, favorite pajamas, toothbrushes, the stuffed animals from their beds. Sophia won't sleep without her special blanket, the purple one with stars. Michael needs his dinosaur nightlight, or he gets anxious in the dark. Jacob absorbed this information like he was preparing for the most important business presentation of his life, mentally cataloging every detail. These weren't abstract data points. They were the framework of his children's lives, the small rituals and preferences that made them feel safe and loved. While Ms. Patel helped the children in their rooms, Jacob moved through the house, trying to understand the life Elena had built here. The refrigerator door was covered with school schedules, doctor appointment reminders, and photographs. Michael winning a science fair, Sophia in a ballet costume, both children blowing out candles on a homemade birthday cake. A life documented in small moments, none of which he had witnessed. In Elena's bedroom, Jacob hesitated, feeling like an intruder. But he needed to understand, needed some insight into the woman she had become. The room was Spartanly neat, the bed made with hospital corners. On the nightstand sat a stack of books, a half-empty glass of water, and prescription bottles, antidepressants, sleep aids, anti-anxiety medication. The labels showed multiple refills, spanning back months. Elena had been struggling for some time. The closet door stood partially open, revealing a modest wardrobe of practical clothes. Gone were the vibrant dresses and impractical shoes Elena had loved in her 20s, replaced by washable fabrics in muted colors. The transformation from the free-spirited artist he'd known to practical single mother was starkly evident in every corner of the room. On the dresser, a small framed photograph caught his eye. It showed Elena, much younger, laughing up at him as he gazed down at her, his expression unguarded and tender. He remembered that day, a rare weekend away at a friend's cabin in the mountains. They'd been happy then, before his ambition and her dreams began pulling them in different directions. Jacob picked up the photo, his throat tight. She had kept this, all these years. Despite everything, despite his abandonment and her struggles, she had preserved this moment when love had seemed simple and sufficient. Mr. Reinhardt. Ms. Patel's voice called from the hallway. The children are almost ready. He set down the photograph and rejoined the others, finding Michael and Sophia in the living room with small suitcases and backpacks. Sophia clutched not only her rabbit but also a purple blanket, exactly as Ms. Patel had described. Michael held a dinosaur nightlight shaped, like a friendly triceratops. "We're ready," Michael declared, though his uncertain expression belied his confident words. Jacob knelt down to their level, remembering how his own father had always stood tall and distant above him. He wouldn't repeat those mistakes. "I know this is scary," he said gently. "Everything is changing very quickly, but I promise you'll be safe with me until your mom gets better." Sophia, still largely silent, studied his face with Elena's thoughtful eyes. "Do you have a dog?" she asked unexpectedly. "No," Jacob answered honestly. "I don't have any pets." "Good," she said with a decisive nod. "I'm allergic to dogs. Mommy says they make me sneeze." Another crucial piece of information he hadn't known. Jacob filed it away carefully. "No dogs," he promised. "Just us. Just us." The phrase hung in the air, full of significance. No longer just Jacob Reinhardt, corporate titan and eligible bachelor. Now Jacob Reinhardt, father of twins. The title felt foreign, terrifying, and yet somehow right, like a coat he'd forgotten he owned. Finding it again and discovering it still fit perfectly. Jacob's penthouse in the Archer building looked exactly as he had left it that morning. Immaculately clean, stylishly minimalist, and utterly unsuitable for children. The floor-to-ceiling windows offered spectacular city views, but had no child-proof locks. The glass coffee table had sharp corners at perfect head-bumping height for a 7-year-old. The open-plan kitchen featured easily accessible cabinets filled with expensive liquor and cleaning products. Ms. Patel surveyed the space with professional detachment. "We'll need to make some adjustments," she said diplomatically. Michael and Sophia stood in the entryway, their small suitcases beside them, looking around with undisguised awe. The penthouse was larger than their entire house, with ceilings that soared to intimidating heights and furniture that seemed designed for appearance rather than comfort. "You live here all by yourself?" Michael asked, his voice echoing slightly in the open space. "Yes," Jacob answered, suddenly seeing his home through their eyes. It wasn't a home at all, really, just an expertly designed showcase for his success. "Where will we sleep?" Sophia asked, her words barely above a whisper. It was a reasonable question with no good answer. Jacob had a master suite and one guest room that functioned more as a home office. "You can have my room," he decided. "I'll sleep in the guest room." Ms. Patel gave him an approving nod. "I'll need to do a formal inspection tomorrow, but for tonight, I think we can manage." I'll email you a list of immediate safety concerns to address." After she left, the three of them stood in awkward silence, the reality of their situation settling heavily around them. Jacob had navigated hostile corporate takeovers with less anxiety than he felt now. Faced with two children who were simultaneously strangers and his own flesh and blood. "Are you hungry?" he asked finally, grasping at the most basic of caretaking functions. Both children nodded, though Sophia seemed hesitant to admit it. Jacob opened his refrigerator, confronting its barren interior with fresh dismay. Protein shakes, champagne, a container of weeks-old takeout, and not much else. "I don't usually cook much," he admitted. "How about we order something?" "Pizza," Michael suggested hopefully. "Pizza sounds perfect." That first meal together was eaten around the sleek dining table that had never hosted a family dinner before. Jacob watched in fascination as the children methodically picked different toppings off their slices. Michael removing olives, Sophia carefully extracting mushrooms. Small preferences he was only beginning to learn. "Your mom," Jacob began carefully as they ate. "Has she been feeling sad for a long time?" The twins exchanged a look, some silent communication passing between them. It was Michael who answered. "Since Christmas, she's been different. She sleeps a lot. Sometimes she forgets to make lunch for school. She tries to hide it," Sophia added unexpectedly, her voice stronger than before. "She smiles when we can see her, but her eyes look tired all the time." The simple observation, so insightful from a 7-year-old, made Jacob's chest ache. Elena had been suffering, putting on a brave face for her children while slowly drowning. "Why didn't you live with us?" Michael asked suddenly, pinning Jacob with a direct stare. "Other kids have dads who live with them." The question Jacob had been dreading, delivered with a child's blunt curiosity. He considered various sanitized versions of the truth before deciding they deserved honesty, or at least as much as they could understand. "Your mom and I loved each other once," he said carefully, "but I made choices that took me away from her. I focused on my work instead of our relationship, and we broke up before I knew you existed. Didn't you want to know about us?" Sophia's question was quiet but pointed. "I would have wanted to know," Jacob said firmly. "Very much. But your mom made a decision not to tell me, and I wasn't there for her to change her mind." "Are you mad at her?" Michael asked, frowning. Jacob considered the question seriously. Was he angry? He had missed 7 years of his children's lives. 7 years of first words, first steps, first days of school. But he had also missed 7 years of diaper changes, sleepless nights, and the relentless demands of parenting. And he had been the one to walk away, choosing career advancement over Elena's desire for marriage and family. "No," he said finally. "I'm not mad at her. I'm sad about all the time I missed with you both. But I understand why it happened." After dinner came the challenge of bedtime. Jacob's king-sized bed swallowed the twins, making them look even smaller among his expensive sheets. Getting them settled involved a series of rituals he hadn't anticipated. Teeth-brushing negotiations, the strategic placement of Michael's dinosaur nightlight, proper arrangement of Sophia's purple blanket and stuffed rabbit. "Will you read to us?" Sophia asked as Jacob was about to turn off the light. "Mommy always reads a story." They hadn't brought any children's books, and Jacob's collection ran to business biographies and political nonfiction. "I don't have any good books for kids," he admitted. "But maybe I could tell you a story instead?" The twins settled in expectantly. Jacob perched awkwardly on the edge of the bed, racking his brain for an appropriate story. In the end, he found himself telling them about his own childhood. Growing up in a small town not unlike Briar Hills, his parents' bookstore where he'd spent hours reading adventure stories, the treehouse his father had built him for his 10th birthday. He was surprised by how easily the memories came, stories he hadn't told anyone in years. The children listened with rapt attention, asking questions and giggling at the funny parts. When he finally kissed their foreheads goodnight and turned out the light, leaving the door cracked open at Sophia's insistent request, Jacob felt something unfamiliar warming his chest, a tentative connection forming, fragile but real. The next morning brought a rush of new challenges, finding breakfast foods the children would actually eat, locating the elementary school, explaining to his assistant why he wouldn't be in the office for the foreseeable future. Jacob approached each task with the same methodical focus he applied to business problems, creating systems and contingency plans. Between these logistics, he checked in with the hospital. Elena's condition remained stable but unchanged. The doctors were carefully monitoring her, weaning her slowly off sedation. Jacob arranged for flowers to be delivered to her room. Not an impersonal bouquet from his usual corporate florist, but wildflowers similar to those that had once grown behind the blue house. After dropping the children at school, an emotional scene that left him surprisingly shaken, Jacob headed straight to the hospital. The morning visiting hours were quieter, the corridors less crowded. He found Elena's room easily, relieved to see some color had returned to her cheeks overnight. As he settled into the chair beside her bed, a nurse entered to check her vitals. "She's doing better today," the nurse offered encouragingly. "The doctor reduced her sedation this morning. She might wake up soon." "Thank you," Jacob said, gratitude washing through him. He hadn't realized how tightly he'd been holding himself until that moment, how deeply he'd feared that Elena might not recover. Once alone with her, Jacob found himself talking, the words coming more easily in her unconsciousness. He told her about the children, how well they were adjusting, how clearly they loved her. He talked about the renovations he'd already started on his penthouse, child-proofing the most dangerous areas and ordering proper beds for a new children's room. He confessed his fears and inadequacies, his determination to do better by them, by all of them, than he had before. "I didn't know how empty my life was," he admitted softly, holding her hand. "All this success, all this money, and for what? I have no one to share it with. No one who cares about the man behind the achievement." A slight pressure against his fingers made him stop mid-sentence. Elena's hand had tightened around his, just barely. Her eyelids fluttered but didn't open. "Elena." Jacob leaned forward, heart pounding. "Can you hear me?" Her lips parted slightly, and she made a small sound. Not quite words, but definitely a response. Jacob pressed the call button for the nurse, who hurried in and immediately checked Elena's vitals. "She's starting to wake up," the nurse confirmed. "It might take a while. The medication is still working its way out of her system. But this is a very good sign." Hope, an emotion Jacob had carefully rationed throughout his adult life, surged through him with unexpected force. He stayed by Elena's side, watching for every sign of returning consciousness, a twitch of her fingers, a change in her breathing, slight movements behind her eyelids. Shortly after noon, Elena's eyes finally opened, just briefly at first, then longer. She blinked in confusion at the hospital ceiling, her gaze wandering until it landed on Jacob. Recognition dawned slowly, followed by disbelief. "Jacob." Her voice was raspy from disuse, barely audible. "I'm here," he said, moving closer so she could see him clearly. "The children called me. They're safe. They're with me." A tear slipped down Elena's cheek. "You know," she whispered. "Yes," Jacob confirmed, his own voice rough with emotion. "I know they're mine. I know everything." Elena closed her eyes again, more tears escaping. "I'm sorry," she managed. "Shoo," Jacob soothed, wiping her tears gently with his thumb. "We have time to talk about all of that. Right now, you just need to focus on getting better." "The children are fine," Jacob assured her. "They're in school now. They miss you, but they're adjusting. They're incredible, Elena. You've done an amazing job with them." A ghost of a smile touched Elena's lips before exhaustion pulled her back toward sleep. "Stay," she murmured, her grip on his hand tightening slightly. "I'm not going anywhere," Jacob promised, settling back in the chair beside her bed. "Not this time." The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of hospital visits, school drop-offs, and hasty renovations to Jacob's penthouse. He hired contractors to transform his home office into a proper bedroom for the twins, complete with colorful walls, sturdy furniture, and enough safety features to satisfy even the most stringent social worker. Ms. Patel had been impressed during her follow-up inspection, noting that the changes went well beyond minimum requirements. "Most people just do the bare minimum," she'd commented, running her fingers along the newly installed child-height bookshelves stocked with age-appropriate reading material. "You've put real thought into this." Jacob had shrugged off the compliment, uncomfortable with praise for what seemed like basic responsibility. If he was going to be a father, a real father, not just a biological one, he wanted to do it right. Besides, money made these transformations easy. He was acutely aware that Elena hadn't had that luxury. Elena was improving gradually, moving from the ICU to a regular room. Her physical recovery proceeded smoothly, but the doctors were cautious about her mental health. The psychiatrist assigned to her case had recommended an inpatient treatment program following her discharge, 30 days minimum at a facility specializing in depression and suicidal ideation. It's the best option, the psychiatrist had explained to Jacob during a consultation. Ms. Morales has been struggling with untreated depression for some time. The attempt wasn't impulsive. It was the culmination of a long downward spiral. Jacob had nodded, swallowing past the lump in his throat. Whatever she needs. Cost isn't an issue. Now, as he sat in the elementary school parking lot waiting for the final bell, Jacob reviewed his mental checklist for the afternoon. Michael had baseball practice at 4, which would give him time to help Sophia with her reading homework. She was struggling, according to her teacher, but too proud to admit it. After dinner, they had promised to video chat with Elena, their nightly ritual that provided stability for the children and visible proof for Elena that they were thriving in her absence. The school doors burst open, releasing a flood of children into the bright spring afternoon. Jacob spotted Michael first, his backpack bouncing as he raced down the steps. Sophia followed more sedately, deep in conversation with a girl her age. The contrast between them, Michael's exuberance and Sophia's quiet intensity, never failed to fascinate Jacob. They were so clearly siblings, with their matching dark eyes and stubborn chins, yet their personalities diverged in ways that highlighted their individuality. "Dad," Michael called, spotting Jacob's car and sprinting toward it. The word still gave Jacob a jolt, part shock, part pleasure. The twins had started calling him Dad about a week ago, after a conversation with Elena during which she had explicitly given her blessing. "He is your dad," she had told them from her hospital bed, her eyes meeting Jacob's over their heads. "And he loves you very much." Michael tumbled into the back seat, already talking about the class pet hamster he'd been allowed to hold. Sophia slid in more carefully, buckling her seatbelt before offering a shy smile. "Hi, Dad. How was school?" Jacob asked, easing into the after-school traffic. "Connor Thompson said his science project is going to be better than mine, but he's wrong," Michael announced. "His is just about growing plants with different kinds of water. Mine is about electricity, and it's going to have lights and everything." "Sounds impressive," Jacob agreed. "We can work on it this weekend." He glanced at Sophia in the rearview mirror. "How about you?" "Good day." Sophia nodded, then hesitated. "Ms. Garcia wants to talk to you," she said quietly. "About my reading test." Jacob felt a twinge of concern. "Did something happen with the test?" "I didn't finish," Sophia admitted, looking down at her hands. The words got all jumbled up again. This was new information, and Jacob filed it away carefully. "Words get jumbled up for you sometimes." Sophia nodded miserably. "Mommy knows. She was going to take me to a special doctor, but then she got too sad." Jacob's heart tightened at the simple way Sophia described her mother's depression. "I'll talk to Ms. Garcia," he promised. "And we'll find that special doctor too. Lots of kids see words differently. They just need some extra help." Sophia's relief was palpable, her small shoulders relaxing. "Can we visit Mom before dinner?" she asked. "Absolutely," Jacob agreed. "She's been asking about your art project. You can bring it to show her." The hospital had become a familiar stop in their daily routine. The nurses on Elena's floor knew the twins by name now, often having stickers or small treats ready for them. Elena herself looked more like the woman Jacob remembered with each visit, her eyes clearer, her movements more energetic, her smile more genuine. Today she was sitting up in a chair beside her bed, her hair freshly washed and pulled back in a simple ponytail. "There are my favorite people," she said as they entered, opening her arms for the children's enthusiastic hugs. She met Jacob's eyes over their heads, her expression warm with gratitude. While the children chattered about their day, Jacob hung back, watching the easy affection between mother and children. Elena listened attentively to each story, asking questions that showed her deep familiarity with their lives, their friends, their teachers, their ongoing projects and concerns. It was a vivid reminder of the years of parenting she had undertaken alone, building this foundation of trust and communication that he was only beginning to understand. When visiting hours ended, Jacob steered the reluctant children toward the door. "We'll see Mom tomorrow," he promised. "And remember, she'll call before bedtime." Elena caught his hand as he turned to leave. "Thank you," she said softly, the words weighted with meaning beyond simple gratitude. Jacob squeezed her fingers gently. "We're okay," he assured her. "Focus on getting better." Back at the penthouse, the evening routine unfolded with hard-won efficiency. Jacob had discovered that advanced preparation was the key to managing 2 children with minimal chaos. Dinner was already in the slow cooker, a recipe from the family-friendly meals cookbook his assistant had ordered after witnessing his culinary distress. Homework stations were set up at the dining table, with all necessary supplies organized in color-coded bins. "Can we have ice cream after dinner?" Michael asked hopefully as he unpacked his math worksheet. "If you finish your homework," Jacob agreed, finding himself increasingly susceptible to his son's negotiations. He was learning to balance reasonable boundaries with occasional indulgences, a parenting skill that didn't come naturally to someone accustomed to the black-and-white world of corporate decisions. After dinner, homework completion, strategic ice cream distribution, and a surprisingly intense game of Uno, it was time for the nightly call with Elena. The children crowded around the tablet, eager to show her the day's accomplishments. A perfect spelling test for Michael, a watercolor painting for Sophia. Elena praised them both, her smile warm even through the digital connection. 5 more minutes, Jacob warned when the conversation had gone on longer than usual. Then it's shower time. The twins groaned but didn't argue, accustomed now to the bedtime schedule Jacob had established. After they had said their goodnights to Elena, Jacob took the tablet into the kitchen for a private word. "How are you really?" he asked, keeping his voice low. Elena's smile faded slightly. "Better," she said honestly. "The medication is helping. And talking helps too." She hesitated. "The therapist wants to discuss the rehab facility options tomorrow. Would you be able to come?" "Of course," Jacob said immediately. "I'll arrange it." "Jacob," Elena looked down, then back up, meeting his gaze directly. "We need to talk about what happens next. About the children, about everything." "We will," he promised. "But one step at a time, okay? First, you get better. Then we figure out the rest." After the children were tucked in, a process that now included specific stuffed animal arrangements, precise door-opening angles, and the recitation of increasingly elaborate made-up stories, Jacob collapsed onto his living room sofa. The space that had once been a pristine showcase now bore the comfortable signs of family life. Homework papers on the coffee table, a forgotten sock under the armchair, picture books stacked haphazardly on the end table. His phone buzzed with work emails, dozens of them, as always. Jacob had been working remotely, handling the most urgent matters during school hours. And after bedtime, his executive team had stepped up admirably, but some decisions still required his input. He scrolled through the messages, prioritizing those that needed immediate attention. A text from his mother interrupted his work focus. "How are my surprise grandchildren doing? When can I meet them?" Jacob smiled wearily. His mother's response to the news had been typically direct, initial shock, followed by immediate acceptance and practical questions about when she should visit. He'd been putting her off, wanting to establish some stability before introducing another new element into the children's lives. But perhaps it was time. The twins could benefit from an experienced grandmother, and Jacob could certainly use the reinforcement. "They're good," he typed back. "How about this weekend?" His mother's response was immediate and enthusiastic, followed by a barrage of questions about the children's likes, dislikes, allergies, and favorite activities. Jacob answered as best he could, realizing how much he had learned about Michael and Sophia in such a short time. Later, lying awake in his new bedroom, what had once been a rarely used guest room, Jacob reflected on the seismic shift in his life. 3 weeks ago, he had been completely focused on a potential merger that would have expanded his company's market share by 20%. Now, that same merger was proceeding without his daily involvement, and he found he didn't particularly care. The metrics that had once obsessed him, quarterly projections, competitor analyses, stock prices, seemed trivial compared to Sophia's reading challenges and Michael's science project. Was this what it meant to be a father? This fundamental reordering of priorities, this bone-deep certainty that nothing mattered more than the well-being of 2 small humans who shared his DNA. Jacob had always assumed that becoming a parent would feel like a burden, a limitation on his freedom and ambition. Instead, it felt like an expansion, as if his world, previously narrowed to the single focus of corporate success, had suddenly broadened to include whole dimensions he hadn't known existed. His phone buzzed again, not a work email this time, but a text from Elena. A photo of herself in her hospital room, smiling tentatively at the camera. "For the kids," she'd written. "So they can see I'm okay. You can show them in the morning." Jacob studied her face in the dim light of his phone screen. The Elena he had known at 25 had been vibrantly confident, fearlessly creative, with an optimism that had sometimes irritated his more practical nature. This Elena was different, tempered by struggle, humbled by defeat, but with a strength he hadn't fully appreciated before. Raising 2 children alone while battling depression would have broken many people. She had persevered, creating a home filled with love and stability despite her own internal darkness. "You're incredible," he texted back impulsively. "They miss you." "We all do." 3 dots appeared, disappeared, then reappeared as Elena composed her response. Finally, it came through. "I miss you too. All of you." Jacob fell asleep with the phone still in his hand, those simple words easing something tight in his chest. Whatever came next, and there would be complications, adjustments, hard conversations, they would face it together. For the first time in a very long time, he wasn't alone. The Willowbrook Rehabilitation Center sat on 20 acres of landscaped grounds about an hour outside the city. Its red brick buildings, connected by covered walkways, looked more like a small liberal arts college than a psychiatric facility. Jacob pulled into the circular drive at precisely noon, checking his reflection in the rearview mirror before getting out. The twins were with his mother today, their first full day together, giving Jacob the opportunity to help Elena settle in without worrying about the children's reactions. He found her waiting in her hospital room, a small duffel bag packed with the essentials he'd brought from her house. She wore jeans and a simple blue sweater that made her look both younger and more vulnerable than the hospital gown had. Her hair was pulled back, revealing the delicate line of her jaw that he remembered tracing with his fingertips a lifetime ago. "Ready?" he asked, picking up her bag. Elena nodded, though her expression betrayed her nervousness. 30 days feels like a long time to be away from them. "They understand you're going to a special doctor to help with the sadness," Jacob assured her. The child psychologist they consulted had recommended honesty with the twins, framed in age-appropriate terms. "And they're excited about all the ways we can stay connected. Video calls, letters, pictures." The drive to Willowbrook passed mostly in comfortable silence. Jacob had loaded a playlist of Elena's old favorites, indie folk music that had once served as the soundtrack to their relationship, and she smiled in recognition as the familiar melodies filled the car. "You remembered," she said softly. "I remember everything," Jacob replied, keeping his eyes on the road. It wasn't entirely true. There were gaps in his memory of their time together, details lost to the intervening years. But the important things remained. How her laugh started deep in her chest before bubbling up. How her eyes crinkled at the corners when she was genuinely happy. How she could sit in perfect silence for hours while working on a painting. At Willowbrook, they were greeted by Dr. Marshall, the program director, a woman in her 50s with a calm demeanor and direct gaze. She gave them a brief tour of the facilities, comfortable common areas, a sunny art studio, garden spaces designed for reflection. "The first week is focused on stabilization," Dr. Marshall explained as they walked the grounds. "Limited outside contact, intensive individual therapy, introduction to group sessions. The second week, we begin working more deeply on underlying issues and developing coping strategies. By week 3, we're typically implementing those strategies and preparing for the transition back to daily life." Elena listened attentively, asking thoughtful questions about the program's approach to medication management and therapeutic techniques. Jacob found himself impressed by her engagement. This wasn't someone being forced into treatment, but a woman actively seeking tools to heal herself. All too soon, it was time for Jacob to leave. They stood in the quiet garden outside the women's residence, the afternoon sun warming the air around them. "The kids wanted me to give you this," Jacob said, pulling a large envelope from his jacket. Inside were drawings from both children, Michael's bold, colorful depiction of their family, including stick figures labeled Mom, Dad, Me, and Sophia, and Sophia's more detailed sketch of the blue house with all of them standing together on the porch. Elena's eyes welled up as she studied the drawings. "They put you in the picture," she said, her finger tracing the stick figure Jacob. "Already, they see us as a family. Is that what you want?" Jacob asked carefully. "For us to be a family?" Elena looked up at him, her expression serious. I don't know what I want yet, Jacob. I need to focus on getting better first, on being the mother they deserve. Of course, Jacob agreed quickly. I didn't mean to pressure you. Elena's smile was gentle. You didn't. It's a fair question, but I can't make decisions about us, about our future, until I've dealt with my present. Take all the time you need, Jacob said. I'll take care of everything else. After a slightly awkward goodbye, neither sure if a hug was appropriate, Jacob drove back to the city alone, the empty passenger seat a tangible reminder of the uncertainties ahead. They weren't a couple. They hadn't been for 8 years. Yet circumstances had thrust them into an intimate co-parenting relationship with no time to adjust to the new dynamic. His mother had texted updates throughout the day, the twins helping make cookies, a trip to the nearby park, Michael teaching her the rules of his made-up card game. The glimpse into their day without him brought both relief and a strange hollow feeling in his chest. He'd grown accustomed to their constant presence, the noise and energy they brought to his formerly quiet life. Back at the penthouse, he found all three engaged in what appeared to be a highly competitive game of Candyland. His mother, Barbara Reinhardt, retired literature professor and formidable Scrabble champion, looked up with a triumphant smile. Your son cheats, she informed him matter-of-factly. But he's not very good at it yet. I don't cheat, Michael protested, though his guilty expression suggested otherwise. Jacob hung his keys on the new hook by the door, part of the organizational system that had gradually evolved to accommodate family life. How was your day with Grandma? He asked, accepting Sophia's quiet hug and Michael's more boisterous greeting. She knows all about dinosaurs, Michael reported, clearly impressed. Even more than my teacher. And she helped me with my reading, Sophia added. She says I might have dyslexia, which is when letters get mixed up, but lots of really smart people have it. Jacob met his mother's eyes over the children's heads, raising an eyebrow at this amateur diagnosis. Barbara shrugged unapologetically. I taught college for 30 years, she reminded him. I've seen it enough to recognize the signs. You should have her tested. Later, after the children were in bed, Jacob and his mother sat in the living room with glasses of wine. Barbara studied her son thoughtfully, noting the changes in him, the shadows under his eyes, yes, but also the new softness in his expression, the way he moved with more awareness of his surroundings, as if perpetually watching for small figures who might need his protection. You've taken to fatherhood surprisingly well, she observed. For someone who once told me he'd never have children. Jacob smiled wryly. Did I say that? I don't remember. Repeatedly, usually while discussing your 5-year corporate expansion plans. Barbara sipped her wine. I'm proud of you, Jacob. These children needed you, and you stepped up. That matters. I didn't have much choice, Jacob pointed out. What was I supposed to do? Leave them with strangers. We always have choices, his mother corrected him gently. You could have hired full-time care. You could have maintained your work schedule and seen them only on weekends. You could have handled the financial obligations while remaining emotionally distant. She set down her glass. Those were all viable options, and many men would have taken them. You didn't. Jacob hadn't thought of it that way. He'd reacted to the crisis instinctively, reorganizing his life around the children's needs without really considering alternatives. They're good kids, he said simply. Elena did an amazing job with them. Yes, she did, Barbara agreed. And now you're helping her when she needs it most. That's what family does. She hesitated before adding, do you still love her? The question caught Jacob off guard. I don't know, he answered honestly. I care about her. I admire her strength. But we're different people now than we were 8 years ago. Love changes form, his mother said, with the wisdom of someone who had experienced decades of marriage before his father's death. It doesn't always look the same at 40 as it did at 25. The following weeks fell into a new rhythm. Jacob balanced work responsibilities with school drop-offs and pickups, baseball practices, ballet lessons, and weekend outings designed to give the children new experiences while respecting their need for routine. His mother stayed for 10 days, her presence a steadying influence as they all adjusted to Elena's absence. Sophia was evaluated by an educational psychologist who confirmed what Barbara had suspected, mild dyslexia that explained her reading difficulties. With the diagnosis came recommendations for specialized instruction and accommodations at school. Jacob threw himself into researching the condition, attending parent workshops, and implementing strategies to support her learning at home. Michael channeled his energy into his science project, with Jacob serving as technical advisor and supply procurer. Together, they built a working model of a simple electrical circuit that illuminated different colored lights when connected correctly. Michael's pride when it functioned perfectly was infectious, his grin so wide it seemed to split his face. Their nightly calls with Elena became the centerpiece of each day. As the weeks passed, the changes in her were subtle but significant. Her voice stronger, her eyes clearer, her emotions more regulated. She shared insights from her therapy sessions that helped Jacob better understand what she had experienced. The postpartum depression after the twins' birth that had never fully resolved, the financial stress of raising 2 children on a teacher's salary, the isolation of single parenthood in a town where she had few close connections. "I kept thinking I should be able to handle it all," she explained during one call, after the children had gone to brush their teeth. "That asking for help meant I was failing them somehow." "I understand that feeling," Jacob admitted. "The need to prove you can do everything yourself." Elena smiled sadly. "We're quite a pair, aren't we? Both too stubborn to admit when we're drowning." 3 weeks into Elena's treatment, Jacob received an unexpected call from her therapist, Dr. Weston. With Elena's permission, she wanted to schedule a joint session to discuss post-discharge plans. "Family support is crucial for maintaining progress," Dr. Weston explained. "And since you'll be co-parenting, it's important to establish healthy communication patterns now." The session took place via secure video link, with Dr. Weston facilitating from Willowbrook. Jacob sat in his home office, nervously straightening papers on his desk before the call connected. Elena appeared on screen, sitting in what looked like a comfortable counseling room, wearing a cardigan he recognized from her closet at the Blue House. Dr. Weston guided them through a structured conversation about practical concerns, medication management, therapy continuation, childcare arrangements, before addressing the elephant in the room. "Elena has expressed concerns about returning to her house in Briar Hills," she said gently. "Both the practical challenges of living alone with the children again so soon after treatment and the emotional associations the house now carries for her." Jacob hadn't considered this aspect of Elena's recovery. The Blue House represented both her independence and the site of her darkest moment, a complicated emotional landscape to navigate while still fragile. "What would help?" he asked directly, looking at Elena rather than Dr. Weston. Elena tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, a nervous gesture he remembered from years ago. "I've been thinking about it a lot," she said carefully. "The most sensible option seems to be selling the house and moving closer to the city. The children are settled in their new school here. I could find teaching positions more easily, and we could establish a co-parenting routine that's not dependent on long drives." The practical considerations made sense, but Jacob sensed there was more she wasn't saying. "And what would you want? In an ideal world where practicality didn't matter?" Elena's smile was small but genuine. "You always could see through me." She took a deep breath. "In an ideal world, I'd want us to try again, not just as co-parents, but as something more. But I know that's asking a lot, given our history and everything that's happened." Jacob felt his heart rate accelerate. "It's not too much to ask," he said quietly. "I've been thinking the same thing." Dr. Weston cleared her throat gently. "These are important feelings to acknowledge," she said. "But I would caution against making major relationship decisions during this transition period. Elena is still integrating significant therapeutic work, and both of you are adjusting to new parenting roles." She was right, of course. The sensible approach would be to move slowly, to prioritize stability for the children and Elena's continued recovery. But sitting in his carefully organized office, looking at the woman whose absence had left a void in his life that no amount of success had filled, Jacob found himself unwilling to be sensible. "I have a suggestion," he said, surprising himself with the words even as they left his mouth. "The house in Hampton Bay, my parents' old summer place. It's sitting empty most of the year, it's only 30 minutes from the city, and it's near excellent schools. What if you and the children moved there temporarily? You'd have your own space, but I could be nearby when needed. We could give ourselves time to figure out everything else." Dr. Weston looked thoughtful. "That could be a good transitional arrangement, provided clear boundaries are established." Elena's expression was harder to read. "You kept the beach house?" she asked. "After all this time?" Jacob nodded. They had spent 2 blissful weeks there during their relationship, planning imaginary renovations and pretending it was theirs rather than his parents'. After his father died and his mother downsized, Jacob had purchased it from the estate, though he rarely visited. It needs some updating, he admitted, but it's peaceful there. Good for healing. Elena's eyes glistened with unshed tears. I'd like that, she said softly. A fresh start by the ocean. As they worked through the logistics, the timing of the move, necessary renovations, school transfers, Jacob felt something long dormant stirring in his chest. Not the desperate passion of their youth, but something steadier, more resilient. A second chance, built on the foundation of who they had become rather than who they had been. They weren't the same people who had walked away from each other 8 years ago. Life had humbled them both, taught them hard lessons about pride and vulnerability. But perhaps that was exactly why they might succeed this time, because they understood now what truly mattered, and it wasn't corporate success or stubborn independence. It was family. It was forgiveness. It was the courage to try again, even knowing you might fail. And most of all, it was the quiet, revolutionary act of choosing love over fear, day after day, even when it was hard. Especially when it was hard.